Of all the important characters to get to in Masters of the Universe Classics, completing the royal family was definitely top of the list. They were very important in the show, and we even showed Queen Marlena as one of the characters we wanted to get to in the opening slides at New York Comic-Con years ago, and thank you for Toy News International for letting me grab this image. Even though I created the image, I couldn't find it, so I borrowed their reprint of it. So Queen Marlena and King Randor, two characters that are really instrumental to the lore of Masters of the Universe, and Queen Marlena in particular, a figure that was really, well, I guess missing from the vintage line. Although granted, females don't sell as well in boy-themed toy lines, which Masters of the Universe, the original one from the 80s, was definitely aimed at young boys, even though there was a huge number of girls that were into it. I mean, like, at so many, actually, that's a big reason She-Ra was created. And, maybe Queen Marlena could have been released in the She-Ra line. Maybe she would have looked like this. But there obviously was a lot of demand for her because people were creating customs of her as for the vintage line, like crazy. So getting her into the classics line was obviously something we really wanted to do. She's a major character. She had a ton of screen time in all of the entertainment. Well, I guess minus the 87 movie, but King Randor didn't appear in that either. That's not important right now. And both Queen Marlena and Randor were reimagined in the 2000 X series as well, and also had a lot of screen time. So Queen Marlena got updated. She kind of lost her green dress, but got a white dress. But same thing, she played a very prominent role in the series, and even as the show went on, she even got a more, I guess you could say, warrior outfit, which she wore. I know she wore it in one episode. She may have worn it more than one. I'm sure people in the comments will correct me. But she, as the show progressed, she got more and more screen time to the point that she was really actually acting like a master, and the masters being the heroes. That's the name of the team, like the Avengers. And, she was doing kind of warrior stuff and suited up in a more battle armor look, which honestly would have made a great action figure. And trying to figure out which version of Marlena to do, we really did look at her battle armor in the 2000X series because it's kind of like Princess Leia in Bouche disguise from Return of the Jedi. When you put a female character in armor, it sells better. But this isn't a retail line, so we don't need to deal with that. We wanted to do a character the fans were going to really want. And of course, we looked at the the original versions of her where she looks a little bit more like a French queen or maybe an English queen, I guess. Even the ones where she has green hair in some of the early comic books and stuff, and Randor looks a bit more like a muddled old king who's sort of past his prime. But either way, we knew that even with the battle armor and with all these other looks, fans were really going to want the green dress version because that was the one that was seen on Filmation. And at the time, we didn't have rights to Filmation, but that didn't mean we couldn't put her in a green dress because we had full rights to doing Queen Marlena. She was, she had appearances in the mythology well before Filmation came along. And as a matter of fact, she had reference to being in a green dress. Filmation actually based their concept off of this version of her from the mini-comics. So no problem at all doing her in the green dress. There's Randor as an old man with books. I love that. Looks more like Santa Claus. And then the final version of Queen Marlena that was under consideration was her astronaut version. So for those of you who don't know, she's actually from planet Earth. If you've ever heard of it, it's named after dirt. And she came to Eternia and there's young Randor from Filmation, sans beard, looking all, young, and she's all swoony and, et cetera, and that's how they met. She crash landed, and they fell in love, and then they had twins, and then one got stolen, and, it's a horrible story after that until they get reunited. So if we were going to do the green dress version, or we going to do the astronaut version, we knew fans were going to want, at the end of the day, more than one Marlena. And we didn't know if we had the SKUs to do that, at least at this time. So really got thinking, okay, is there a way we can do a twofer where we can do Astronaut Marlena and we can do Queen Marlena in the same figure? And we met with the Horsemen and we talked about it. And at the end of the day, we realized, this probably is possible if we do kind of a swappable dress and a pop-on-able space helmet. Is that a word? Pop-onable? Did I just make that up? And, just gave her different accessories, blasters and staves and swords and Cringers and all that. We'll get to Cringer. So she basically came with everything you see here, a ton, which meant she was going to be way more than a basic figure. And it became pretty obvious that she was going to be a good candidate then to do for San Diego Comic-Con because she was well known, she was really fan demanded, and she had a lot of pieces. And it wasn't going to be too complicated to switch her between space mode and queen mode simply by swapping the heads, and then the dress had a really innovative kind of pop seam where in the back of the dress and the space suit top, it just pulled apart. So you can see it here, had these little tabs, and you could just pop one off and pop the other one on. It was a pretty easy kind of dress uniform swapping maneuver, and it gave you two very unique looking figures. I mean, we could have released both of these as unique SKUs. They were that different. And I think doing it for Comic-Con made it really special because you were really getting kind of two figures in one, not to mention the bonus Cringer, which we'll get to, which is why this video is a little longer, because we have to cover him too. All right, so speaking of Comic-Con releases, in the past, and pardon me if this is a little bit of a repeat from previous Comic-Con exclusive director's commentaries I've done, but it bears repeating. The previous Comic-Con exclusives before classics, before Matty Collector, like She-Ra or Tweety Bird here, were only available at the shows, at Comic-Con and I think at C2E2, maybe some of the Wizard Worlds. But either way, they were con exclusives. The only way you could get them was in person. There was no way to get them through the mail, ordering it. There was no Matty Collector at that time. And so the specialness of them was at the show. Once we had Matty Collector, the kind of marching orders from management, from those who signed the paychecks, was if you're going to have an item at Comic-Con now, you have to make it special for the show and do a different version online, because now that you can get it online, every item is really kind of a Comic-Con item. And so we did that with hero characters like Hero and Orko by doing, Hero had the Comic-Con badge under his armor and Orko had the all-clear variant. And every year we, I don't want to say struggled, but we brainstormed. Yeah, that's a good word. Let's use that one. We brainstormed how we could make the exclusives special for the show in a unique way to fulfill this request from management. And we did this with all the exclusives, not just Masters, like the DC Wonder Twins exclusive. Notoriously, Gleek the Monkey there was in a poly bag, so you could only get Gleek the Monkey at the show free with purchase while supplies last. And then the Wonder Twins themselves were available both at the show and online. So we had to basically find new ways for this to work every year and try to be a little different. So with Plastic Man, again, a DC exclusive that we did for the show, you could get Plastic Man online, but only at the show could you get Plastic Man's suitcase, as if he was going to the show. And then if you pop the suitcase open, there were comic books, as if he was shopping at the show. And this was also celebrating DC's 75th anniversary, so we had comic books that were commemorating like the entire history of DC, original, Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman. Not necessarily their first appearance, but some quintessential ones. And then, of course, the suitcase doubled as Plastic Man himself, the idea that he'd formed himself into the suitcase. All right, so back to Queen Marlena. So finding a way to make her special for the show. Well, since we were already going in for a twofer and doing Space Explorer Marlena and Queen Marlena, it wasn't too difficult to figure out, hey, why don't we just split them up and do two different releases, Captain Glenn and Queen Marlena. Each one will have all the parts, but we could do separate figures. Incidentally, her name being Captain Glenn, Marlena Glenn, her last name, Glenn, that absolutely is a direct reference to the NASA astronaut, John Glenn. That was something, I want to say the Filmation series created. It definitely wasn't something I created, but her name being Glenn and being kind of a reference, whether she was, I think she was supposed to be like maybe the great-great-granddaughter or something. Either way, that is a direct reference. So back to Comic-Con in separate releases. So essentially, we had our Queen Marlena package, and then we had our Marlena Glenn package, or Captain Glenn, I think is what we called her, in the spacesuit. Both figures came with all the same parts. They were just packed out differently, but it wasn't just a pack-out difference. It was that we actually changed the name of the figure on package. So if you got her in her spacesuit, you were buying Captain Glenn. And if you were buying her in the Queen outfit, you were buying Queen Marlena. And we even did separate bios for the back, which was great because every time we could do a bio, we could just expand the mythos and the storytelling. Since we didn't have a show, we didn't have any content, so basically anything we could do to add story and content was in favor because it basically just gave new things for fans to talk about because we had nothing, we had no show, we had no movie, we had no comic, and the bios themselves became something fans could engage with, and that's why we did them. So in this case, we got to do 2 different bios, and that was great because it was, twice the information and twice the bio and twice the things for fans to talk about. So it really was 2 completely different figures, which, whether or without Cringer there, I mean, this could have been 2 different releases. We could have released a Queen Marlena figure, and we could have released a Captain Glenn. I mean, they had enough unique parts between the dress and the spacesuit and the helmet and the heads. All right, so a question that comes up a lot is why we did the spacesuit in green and not white. In the show, in the Filmation show, she had a very white spacesuit, very clearly white, kind of modeled after current U.S. astronauts. And there's actually a few reasons for that. A storyline reason and a logistic toy-making reason. And we did actually have plans that we would have just re-released her in a white redeco, or even tried to do kind of another twofer and done the white dress that she wore in 2000X. Here's a fan custom. Sorry, it's a little blurry. I had trouble finding good fan customs online, or at least clear images, so I apologize for that. But yeah, fans definitely did this repaint on their own. We definitely had plans to do this eventually, but just never got to it. But there's a reason we went out with the green one first and not the white one because, again, we could have done white dress and white suit to do 2000X and then Filmation Spacesuit, which I guess is sort of also mixing oil and vinegar because, again, you've got 2000X mixed with Filmation, but either way, neither here nor there. White was definitely something fans wanted to. We would have liked to do it. We didn't. All right, so back to green. So why green for both the spacesuit and the astronaut suit? So obviously the toy answer is because she shared arms and she shared legs. So having a green base for the queen suit meant she was going to also have the same green base with the arms and the legs for her spacesuit version, much as we could have done white and white. It was basically you do white and white or green and green. But there's another reason that we did green. So in some of the original material from the vintage days, Marlena arrives on Eternia with Biff, Beastman, Dr. Scope, and Evelyn Powers. I'm not making this up. Characters that were then transformed into Beastman, Evelyn, and Triclops. But there was another story we wanted to tell. So you may remember this guy, Major Matt Mason. This was Mattel's Spaceman from the 1960s. The toy line came out right before real live astronauts were landing on the moon, unless, of course, you believe that they didn't land on the moon, in which case it was commemorating not landing on the moon. But let's say they landed on the moon. I'm all in favor of them landing on the moon. And either way, everyone was fascinated by space, and it was the right toy line for the right time, especially because they actually worked with Jet Propulsion Laboratory to look at the actual equipment the space astronauts were going to be using. And so they could base the toys off of the actual technology. I mean, of course, they also made up some really fun alien characters. There were 2 of them in the line. This one was one of my favorite, the insectoid-looking guy. But it was mainly about the astronauts. And it wasn't just about Major Matt. He had, I guess you could say, his pals. And all of his accompanying astronauts, like Dave Long here, who was the African-American astronaut, had brightly colored suits. So you basically had Major Matt in the white or the silver suit, and then you had yellow, blue, and orange/red suits. So, how does this play in? Well, if you see the video that I did, actually one of the very first videos I ever did on this channel about the secret of the maps, the MOTUC maps, there was a whole backstory that was created with the idea that we were going to blend both lines together, ideally with a Major Matt Mason Classics line, which you can also see the video that I did about that. While that line never got approved for various reasons, we wanted to bulk up the number of astronauts with Major Matt Mason, and not just with these bootlegs that came out in the 60s that were totally ripping it off. And I don't know how they got to market, but I guess, legal laws were different back then. So our idea was to combine MOTU and Major Matt Mason lore by making Queen Marlena the green astronaut from the Major Matt Mason crew. They didn't have a green one. And if you look at the map of the Horde Empire, you will see that blue sort of trail there on the bottom is noted as the route that Marlena takes from Earth to Eternia, and it's noted as an Einstein-Rosen space bridge. And, with all the fun of time travel and what makes time travel possible, during this voyage, they crash into Garius, the home planet of the blue species, the Gar, and accidentally destroy it. And that sets off a whole other chain of events. But because of time travel, it happens in the past, and she arrives in the future, and I know, time travel gives me headaches. The point is, she was going to arrive on Eternia as a member of Major Matt Mason's crew, and I guess the other ones maybe didn't make it. Incidentally, her spacesuit, when it was being designed, was heavily influenced by the spacesuit from Castle Grayskull, which eventually became a Trollan spacesuit and was used by Jetpack, who was a hero created for the mini-comics. But that's a story for another time. All right. So that's pretty much everything about Queen Marlena. Let's talk about Cringer, the other guy who shared this pack. So Cringer, aka BattleCat's alternate identity, is arguably one of the most popular MOTU characters, and also most popular with the mass public because he's a cute fraidy cat, and he's cartoony, and the public loves that. When you take polls of, not super fans, but like the regular public, BattleCat / Cringer, Orko, He-Man come up, and Skeletor are basically the ones that come up the most, even before Teela or Man-at-Arms or She-Ra. So getting Cringer into the line was definitely something we really wanted to do. And we struggled with that because he's a fully tooled figure, if you're going to do him as a tiger. And he's smaller than BattleCat. So you can't just take BattleCat, remove the armor, slap on a new head, and call that Cringer. It just wasn't going to work for what Classics was all about, because then Cringer would have been too big. I mean, yes, you could always do this, and you could just, take BattleCat's armor off, and, you've got sort of Cringer. I know a lot of people did that as kids. I did that. I would take the armor off and just, use BattleCat without the armor as Cringer. But you really needed a new head, and he needed to be a little smaller. And because of the nature of the way the packing worked, he wound up actually being a little even smaller than we wanted. But he is cute, and he's got the little fang from Filmation, which is just adorably cool. So while it is kind of like, the whole Solomon splitting the baby thing, he wasn't quite big enough, he wasn't quite small enough, he was smaller, but he wasn't tiny. So in the end, I think the Horseman even said that this was designed to sort of be a baby Cringer, which did appear in some episodes. I mean, not a baby, but, younger. And the idea was, in time, once we had a fully tooled slot available, isn't he so cute? Once we had a fully tooled slot, like Ram Man is a fully tooled figure, we were going to do a Cringer at the right scale. This was actually slotted into the 2016 line as part of the Filmation line. The new team that took over once I left, I think, just because of all the tooling that would have been needed, replaced him with a less tool-intensive character. But this was the original idea. He would have been the one fully tooled figure for the year for that line. So in the meantime, though, you got this really cool PVC non-articulated Cringer, which at least would work. I thought when the Horsemen were going to sculpt Cringer, they were going to do it more like this, in a sitting pose, which actually might have made him a little bigger. And I don't know if I ever spoke to them about it or it was just in my head, but this is what I kept thinking we were going to be getting. But they went, I believe Bill or Terry may have talked to them about this, but it was just decided that it wouldn't work packaging-wise, and they had to go with sort of the long version instead of him walking instead of sitting. Either way, they nailed it. They did an amazing job. And sometimes what's in my head, I can't expect them to know about if I don't tell them about it. So definitely no harm, no foul on that. All right, so coming with Queen Marlena versus Adam. Obviously, Cringer is Adam's best bud, but we already did Adam the year before with Orko, and we didn't want to just obviously do another Prince Adam at San Diego Comic-Con. And, even though, Cringer and Adam go together, you could definitely make the argument that Cringer would work with Queen Marlena as well, since not only did they have screen time together, but they were also kind of considered part of the royal family. And of course, they had the whole green thing going because, all people who share the same color should be packaged together, right? That's a rule? Okay, I just made that one up. But hey, see, they had screen time together, and, Queen Marlena obviously was madly in love with Cringer, as seen from this shot. There was definitely the door to do more Queen Marlenas in the future, both the 2000X version in the white dress, her battle armor, other versions of the Spacesuit in white, and much like we did multiple Randors in the line, we definitely, in the long term, wanted to get to this. We just didn't. We kind of ran out of time, but at least we did the quintessential version. So, Randor could have his love, Adam and Adora could have their mother, and the line could feel that much more complete. She was a great figure, and a great con exclusive. I'm so glad we pulled her off the way we did, and I do love the Spacesuit version.